That's the art of Samyama. It's composed of three: concentration, meditation, integration. Three. That's what Samyama is. That's what we focus in our flow program. We create the perfect Samyama before we can apply sutras. In the same way, if we haven't mastered the art of Samyama, we can't do anything in life, frankly speaking. Doesn't matter, whatever may come our way, but if we want to truly experience that extraordinary sense, that sense of a true alignment, building on our thread of manifestation and execution, comes from Maximian. I'll go straight to the background. I'm grateful for the sentiments expressed. That molten state of potentiality where sound and form merge ahead of gross manifestation. I've been consciously working with this in my endeavors, noticing how certain impulses arise and allowing them to take shape. Yet I often encounter that subtle tension between surrendering to the spontaneous arising of Shakti versus actively shaping an outcome. With your insight, I've been returning to this molten state repeatedly before rushing to action, ensuring that actions emerge from pure consciousness rather than conditioning. This extends to my practice as well. Questions. How does one discern when to remain a witness and when to step in as an active force in weaving this reality? Does mastery then lie in perfectly balancing these two states, or is that a lofty idea? When it is time to take action, is the process similar to an artist ferociously chipping away at a block of a marble, gradually uncovering what is already present? I recognize that attachment to specific outcome can create unnecessary fixation, diverting focus from the higher mission, while awaiting the crystallization of an opportunity that feels so deeply aligned with my path. How does one stay fully engaged in the unfolding process without losing stream and slipping into exhaustion, either through the passive waiting or the strain of forcing premature outcomes? How does one navigate the space between receptivity and action? Is there a way to work with Shakti so that alignment and action are in harmony during these liminal spaces? So again, this is very much relates to what we spoke just now, a moment ago. And in the way that question unfolds, the very first question, how can one discern when to remain a witness and when to step as an active force in weaving this reality? Again, you give an answer here by saying, does the mastery then lie in perfectly balancing these two states, or is that a lofty ideal? It's not even balancing, you see, because it's not really two different states. It may seem as a different state, something which has a more pronounced aspect of the witness. And when we are, let's say, become an action itself, then the witness, as it were, recedes and we become one with whatever action is to be taken. But the understanding is that it's not a balancing act between two states. This states are simply modes. They're not states, modes. So what's the difference then? Isn't that one and the same thing? States and modes? It's the two different modes of perception. At the highest level of understanding, and borrowing, let's say, bouncing off what we've discussed just now in response to Kennan's question, individual and universal are but modes of perception. That's it. Otherwise, it's a one-man show. One-man show in parentheses. These are just the modes, and in the same way, everything when it comes to that, how do we distinguish this? At what point? When is that witnessing mode is ready for me to plunge myself into an action? When do I release the arrow? The answer is simple. You see the target, you release the arrow, that's it. You point to the target, you see the target, that's the time, you release the arrow. In the art of archery, in the art of shooting, it's like that. In fact, shooting here, maybe some will take it as a negative example, but it's a very, very fitting example. As many times have been brought as a reminder that the art of meditation in Vedic tradition is referred to as the Dhanur Veda, the department of the 40 aspects of the Vedic knowledge. And Dhanur Veda literally is named after the art of archery. Dhanur, D-H-A-N-U-R, Dhanur, N-U-R. So the art of archery is how far you can pull back the string, because that's what creates that angle at which the force of the arrow to hit the target is the maximum. Literally, if the string is pulled to the point of tension where it cannot go further, and it then has the propensity required to hit the target, that's it. Then it's all down to releasing that once the target is there clearly in view and one points to that. If this example is too sort of specific and too esoteric, I can give a more maybe down-to-earth example. The metaphor here could also serve. When the potter makes something out of clay, depending on tradition, tutelage, and way of working, depending what kind, because pottery is very, very rich and has very, very beautiful tradition that goes back, and like for instance in Japan, it's a way of life. And how many of you know that the cup that was used by the great cultural personage Rukyu, who was considered to be tea master, is under the bulletproof glass in a museum? Why would it be under the bulletproof glass? It's not Mona Lisa, La Gioconda. What's the big deal? A cup used by a tea master, No, it's a cultural heritage. It's a part of the, venerated and understood. And the connotations there, of course, it's not just because it's a tea master. Of course, it's that, great cultural figure, emblematic, who, by the way, is simply known for relaxing the art of tea back to its basic. What is Rukyu said? the art of tea comprised of making tea and drinking it. His cup is under a bulletproof glass, national treasure of Japan. Ceramic, of course, plays tremendously important part in Japanese culture. Not going to go there now, but just to continue with that example, is that when and at what point does the master, the ceramic master, the ceramic maker, right, potter, knows that the clay is in perfect condition now with the right combination of water and powdered clay, whatever sieve through, if added some grain there, a bit of sand, depending on a school, if it's wabi-sabi, for sure it will not just be powdered, it will be deliberately added something to create some roughness to it. At what point the clay is ready to be worked with? There's no manual. You cannot have manual. You cannot say, well, no, it's only in the hand. It's a feeling, nothing else. You cannot lean on anything here. You can only lean on making thousands of these attempts and knowing that, well, this now is the condition. And then in the hands, the skillful hands, something takes shape. At what point the maker knows that that's it, that is happened, or why he discards this, throws it on the side, and continues. Next one. He knows the point is reached where what is desired here cannot be pushed back into previous condition because it's no way going to go back. You can only start again. So you discard that. Just check for yourself how it's done. It's not like each time you sit down and this is the chain production. The masters don't work like that. And the great, great philosophers, likewise, I invite you to join the gang, great, let's say, men of knowledge, wisdom. They work like clay makers, they work like ceramic makers. Making something, no, that's not what I want. Discard. Next, discard. And then something comes out, that's it. How do I know? I don't know. It feels right. That's it. That's worthy now to go into a kiln. That's worthy to be glazed. It will become a cup. It will become a vase. It will become whatever it will become. So that is one single process. In the case of sitting there at the potter's wheel, the witness and an action are fused. You can't separate them. This is why I wanted to give that example. Because in the archery, maybe this is seen as steps. You pull that string, the target is there, and now it's the time to release the target. I mean, release the arrow to hit the target. But in this example with the potter's wheel, it is absolutely seamless and fused. It is fused in the example of the archer as well. If you reflect on this or try it yourself, you will see it is actually fused. It is not separate stages. And that's what art of meditation, as you have learned now, I trust you were with us in that program. That's the art of Samyama. It's composed of three: concentration, meditation, integration. Three. That's what Samyama is. That's what we focus in our flow program. We create the perfect Samyama before we can apply sutras. In the same way, if we haven't mastered the art of Samyama, we can't do anything in life, frankly speaking. Doesn't matter, whatever may come our way, but if we want to truly experience that extraordinary sense, that sense of a true alignment, then art of Samyama needs to be mastered because it is applied everywhere, in all circumstances, in all situations. And it made seamless. When it made seamless, we live by that. Okay? Now, the following questions that you have here, right? When it's time to take action, is the process similar to the artist ferociously chipping away at a block of marble, gradually uncovering what is already present? I like that example very much because just as there are two different schools, speaking of traditional sculpture, there is a school of carving, in other words, carving out. And there's a school of building. The carving out is, of course, is removing what is unnecessary, as Michelangelo said when asked, how does he come up with his ideas that he, executes in such extraordinary manner? He said, I look at the block of marble, and all I do then is to remove what is unnecessary once I see what is locked in that marble. Let me rephrase it because there's a better way of saying it, perhaps. When I look, like paraphrasing Michelangelo, when I look at a slab of marble, and when I perceive a form, the human form, of course, in his case, always human form, then all it is then down to free that form by chiseling away, removing what constrains that form. This is a beautiful analogy of working in consciousness. If you read the Vashishta Yoga, there are many analogies given like that as well. Analogies of carving out a stone, carving out of stone. Consciousness itself is a process by virtue of which something is carved out. And in another school, opposite of that is lumping clay together, right? And building, like a la Rodin, right? Rodin, great French sculptor. A very different approach than sculpting it in terms of carving out. By the way, marble is soft as a stone. Not that I have that much experience. I was a painter, but of course I had tried my hand in sculpture. But I've known and had many friends who were accomplished sculptors, and it is very well known among the sculptors that carving out of marble is a joy, particularly if the block is fresh, if it hasn't been exposed to oxygen for too long, like for too many years, let's say too many decades, because then it's soft. Like sculptors call it, it's like carving out of butter, because marble is soft. This is why marble sculptures can be surreal in the imitation of the material world. You go to Louvre, you can see how some sculptors were attempting to give the impressions of silk and even fabrics that avail the face, and Canova and all this neoclassicists. But the beauty of your analogies that you gave here is exactly that, gradually uncovering what is already present. In fact, freeing what is already there. No ideas come to us. Nothing there is somehow a result or byproduct of thinking about something hard and then suddenly grokking it, or whether this is highest philosophical ideas, innovations, breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs, or mundane thinking, all is either being tuned at a certain level of frequency or simply tapping into what is already there, exists in that field. So in that case, is uncovering what is already present. So your question perfectly contains the answer, as is always the case, or almost always the case with very well presented inquiries. They all contain an answer within itself. So it is that very process, that very process, uncovering what is already present. So this should also give you some thrills that once you tap into something which is genius like, feels like that, what you tapped into, what is already exists, and that bound to be successful because it's not on the account of what you're going to do, how things pan out. No, you tapped into something. It's like gold rush, you know, dug, and you discovered the vein of gold in that rock. Okay, that's it. That's it. Your land. This is the Klondike. That's the gold rush. You're rich now. You got the vein of gold. It's just pure gold there. This is what it is. You see, you have to have a great degree of certainty when it comes to this. I'm speaking that directly to you now, the questioner, so as to give you that degree of, that healthy, audacious way about going about this, because in your that longer paragraph, right, when you speak of this, let's say more like a tempered way of going about this, when you recognize this attachment to specific outcome that can create unnecessary fixation, diverting focus, right? Waiting for the crystallization of the opportunity, you know, being not being sure whether this is with the greatest alignment, right? And you're finally asking here, forcing the premature outcome. How does one navigate the space between receptivity and action? Is there a way to work with Shakti so that alignment and action are in harmony during these liminal spaces? Again, you don't work with Shakti. Just as in response to canon, it's not an act of collaboration. It may sound nice. Yes, we want to reassure someone who is a novice to, maybe dress down certain propensities that still need to be worked on. In this case, I want to say it very boldly and clearly for you. You can only have successful outcome with anything if you work as Shakti. You become one with Shakti. In other words, you don't work with someone. That's the way to understand what you are presenting here. You see? In an interesting way, it correlates and relates to when we speak about it from the perspective of the Samavesha. Because there is a lot of this misunderstanding. Remember, we try to clear that. I'm just saying, remember, to everyone, that Samavesha is as an act, right? That conscious act that one is given into, and then it takes over. We don't know at what point that what is given as an act is incorporated into, or rather not incorporated, rather chisels away and removes what's unnecessary, and what comes forth is only that, let's say, svarupa, a true form. That true form shines forth. This is both true to the outcome of a great skillful sculptor who freed that what was trapped in the marble, or to that skillful meditator who sees how object of his contemplation shines forth in full glory in its essence. It's because that's remember that? Because that's what the art of that togetherness of the dharana dhyana samadhi, right? That the togetherness of that samyama of concentration, meditation, and integration or absorption leads to. It leads to the subject shines forth in its full glory for what it is in essence. Before that, we don't know. Anything we look at is already concealed. Subject-object dynamic here is such that whatever we think about or think of, look at, smell or touch is a concealment, you see? And that concealment is reinforced, as it were, in a state of ignorance, and therefore reinforces that state of what in reality doesn't exist. It's because ignorance is not real. And for that very reason, when that shines forth, we see and perceive everything down to the level of where it, in the first occasional place, seemed as continuously concealed, is now reconfirms the reality of the situation, reconfirms our true nature. This is the Abhinavagupta for you. Where ignorant constantly bumps against the cold surface of the mirror, in other words, each sensory perception reinforces ignorance. For the enlightened, sensory perception is a continued reconfirmation of the reality of one's essence. Something along these lines, paraphrasing. So that should give you, I think, plenty to reflect on. And just remember these analogies that, analogies given, right? Analogy of the potter's wheel. It doesn't work, discard. It's a clay, back into clay. Back, like that, into water, mix it back again, like a dough. And again, now it's ready to work with. It's back to molten state. Okay, let's take a lamp again, put it on the potter's wheel, give it a spin. So it's now right velocity, okay, rotating, and it's in my hands. Skillful, loving, caring hands, no thoughts. There's no need to think about anything. Full, one with that action, completely. The beauty of any true craft, anything that we do, is that. Sooner or later, with the AI and the ChatGPT and all this, we'll realize that this is the time to go back to the basics. This is where the beauty and the joy is. Otherwise, everything else will be done better for us.